Hello, Southern California, and welcome to this week's edition of Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. He is the founder and president of Mosley Wealth Management based right here in Southern California, and I'm your host, Kristin Oakley. This show is all about providing you with retirement planning solutions, and today we are going to tackle one that's at the top of everyone's minds. We're going to be talking about inflation, what you need to know right now about it, and what steps you can be doing to help protect yourself against the damaging effects it can have in your retirement plan. Tom, this is a weighty conversation. I know you're having it often with folks, right?
Well, it impacts everything. You know, they say that high blood pressure is the silent killer because you don't get up and say, I feel like I have high blood pressure today. You just have high blood pressure and you have to take a test for it. And they say that inflation is the same way financially. It will completely destroy a financial plan. Back in 1995, I started my business on June the 8th of 1995. I was working out of a little office in Pasadena, and the manager of insurance and the manager of investments came to me and they said, okay, you've passed your licensing and now it's time for you to start focusing on a group of people to build your business around. And they were thinking doctors or lawyers or
they're thinking, what kind of profession did you want to work with, right?
People with money. People with money. They were thinking that. And I had been in the ministry for 19 years prior to getting into financial services. And I had literally, Kristin, had people sit across the desk from me, and they were in for benevolence from the church. And they were trying to decide whether to buy medicine or buy food because they didn't have enough money for both. So I told those two managers, I looked them in the eye and I said, I want to work with people to make sure they never run out of money the rest of their life. I want to work with retirees. Now, everybody and their brother's a retirement specialist now,
right?
Okay,
yep.
But really, they're not really retirement specialists. They just realize that baby
boomer generation,
they're
right?
retiring, so let's be retirement specialists.
Yeah.
But when you work with people in retirement, you want to make sure they don't run out of income the rest of your life. I've said often on this show, and I've said often on our radio shows that we do together, that in retirement, it's no longer your lump sum, that accumulation amount that you've got in your 401k that's important. It's your income and making sure that you've got that guaranteed income for the rest of your life. And so we began to focus on that. We found out about 2 or 3 years later that taxes were the single biggest thing that would take money out of a person's retirement. And then for a long time, I had grown up and lived earlier and bought my first house during the Jimmy Carter administration. And I remember going to church and being so happy, Kristin, that I got a loan at 15.4% interest. Can you imagine? I mean, people are crying right now about 6 and 7% interest. Yep. And I got that first home loan at 15.4% interest. And there were people at the church where I was serving at that time, and they were like, man, you must have had an inside route to get it at 15.4. I had to pay 16 and I had to pay 17. And one guy said one time said I paid 21% for my loan because that was what inflation was doing. And what have we seen in the past 4 years? We've seen inflation impact that as well. I think it's funny that the big schools that teach financial advisors, and they have a CFP program, and I like the CFP program, but those programs have always focused on 5 things: income, investments,
right?
Okay, taxes, healthcare, and legacy. Since the very beginning, because I had that experience with the Jimmy Carter days, I've always put between income and investments, I've always put inflation.
Yes,
because
you have to plan
inflation
for
can
it.
kill you.
It can.
And we know that now.
Yes, and I think a lot of people were very much lulled to sleep. It wasn't on the top of a lot of folks' minds because the long-term historical rate of inflation has been about 3% per year. But to your point, Tom, what has gone on in the last 4 years, even just the last 3 years? And that's why I think a lot of folks are much more in tune with it and realizing this is a huge problem. It has to be planned for, but especially once you're on a fixed income, how in the world are you supposed to keep up with these rising prices?
Right, and the rising prices, you put together some statistics, and I'm stealing these from Kristen, but in the past 4 years, bacon and sausage up 19.5%, lunch meat up 23%, eggs up 46.8%, butter, margarine 30.9% increase, flour, cooking oil up around 37, 38 each. We'll skip over the children's food because most of you are not still having babies, but you might be raising babies that your kids had, though. I've run into that a whole lot. And cereal and bakery products are like cookies are up 27.3%. We have to have our Oreos. And bread's up 24%. Cereal's up 23.5%. Here's the killer. Car insurance is up 54% nationwide, and gasoline's up 51%. So, you can have a great retirement and not be impacted as much by inflation. Just don't go anywhere. You know, just stay at home.
Don't go anywhere, don't do anything, don't eat anything.
Don't eat anything except maybe what you grow in your garden that we don't have anymore. Here's the deal. If inflation is up 20 to 25%, let's say most people think right now that real inflation is up around 24.9% is the most recent number that I saw. If it's up 24.9% and you're living in retirement on a fixed income, and you had that fixed income in 2019, and you've experienced the last 4 years of inflation that we've had. And the problem with inflation is it never goes down.
Yes.
It never goes back. Once it takes territory, it never gives it back up. So don't expect those prices to go back down. But if you had enough money in 2019 to last you from January 1st on the one hand, all the way to December 31st on the other, but you're really living on a fixed income and that hasn't increased, and if inflation is up 25%, you're going to run out of money on October 1st of this year, because that's 75% of the year. And if you're down in purchasing power to 75% of the purchasing power you had 4 years ago, you're dead. You're dead in the water. How can you tell? A lot of people come in, and I called it the silent killer earlier, and a lot of people come in and they say, well, I don't know if inflation has hurt me. I have 3 questions to ask people. I'll ask you that are out there 3 questions. Are your cash reserves down? Okay. Are your credit card limits up, or what you're carrying on your credit card? And number 3, and I just ran across an article, we are tapping into our 401ks and IRAs earlier now and paying the 10% penalty at a higher rate than we've ever had in history. So are you tapping in to those funds that you've originally set aside for retirement, but you're having to tap into them early because of inflation? So are your cash reserves down? Are your credit card bills up, or what you're carrying for balances? Or are you tapping into your 401k? Now, let me tell you something. Some of you are working with a financial advisor, and even their firms many times call themselves blank investments, because all they're looking at is your lump sum. They're not looking at the other aspects of a financial wealth management, like a wealth management firm like ours would work with you and do. You're working with an advisor rather than a real financial planner. A real financial planner is going to have talked to you in your last meeting, in your last phone call, in your last Zoom about what impact is inflation having on you. And if they're not talking about that right now, then they've got their financial head stuck in the sand right now like an ostrich, and they're ignoring something that's impacting everybody. So you need to have somebody, and you need to build into your financial plan for retirement the idea of inflation. How are we going to, over a period of years, get more and more and more money out of our plan? And how is that going to impact the viability of our plan still being there when I'm 85 years old, when I'm 90 years old, if inflation goes back down? But more importantly, if inflation doesn't go back down and it stays at 4, 5, or 6%, we're in trouble in many cases because of the impact of inflation. You need to talk to somebody who's considering inflation on your financial plan.
And that's why I know it's such a huge pillar of when you build a retirement blueprint for someone is looking at inflation, factoring that in, seeing how it impacts everything else, because the reality is it has to be planned for. So if any of this is resonating with you, if you've been concerned about rising costs and inflation and what that could mean for your retirement, the good news is you can find out how to have a solid plan in place that will help you navigate that successfully. To claim your complimentary retirement blueprint, all you need to do is call that number on the bottom of your screen, 866-709-1462. Or you're also welcome to connect with Tom and the team online. Simply take out your smartphone, and if you open up that camera app, you can point, click, and scan that QR code that you see there down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and then a member of the team will reach out and connect with you to schedule your complimentary visit that way as well. We have a lot more to discuss today on this important topic of inflation. Stay with us. We'll be back right after this.
I had been in the ministry and training for the ministry for about 25 years. It seemed every church I would go to, they would put me in charge of benevolence. And benevolence is when people come to the church and they need money. And they were trying to decide to buy food or buy medicine. And the medicine was some new medicine that was effective, so the drug companies might charge a tremendous amount. And we at the church couldn't afford to help them do that. It was difficult. So when I passed my license on June the 8th, of 1995, I was sitting down with my two managers in downtown Pasadena, and these guys, they said, "Who do you want to work with?" And I said, well, what motivated me to get my license was I want to work with retirees. They said, why not doctors or lawyers? And I said from the very beginning, I want to work with people to make sure they never run out of money, because I had seen it.
Welcome back, Southern California. You're watching Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. He is the founder and president of Mosley Wealth Management. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley. If you're just tuning in and joining us, we are talking today all about inflation and how you can be prepared to navigate that successfully. It can be so scary once you are retired and you're on a fixed income to be able to account for the rising prices. And we were talking during the break, Tom, and I was sharing this analogy with you, and you said, go ahead and share it with the viewers,
Sure.
Right? But basically, think about, let's say you hire a personal trainer, and the trainer has you beef up and gain 250 pounds, okay? But then the trainer puts you on a plan to lose 50 pounds. And they say, isn't that great? I did such a good job for you. You lost 50 pounds. Guess what? You're still up 200 pounds. That's almost what's been happening with our prices. They've inflated the prices, they've gone up, and now they're saying, oh, well, inflation's down. But they're not back to where they were, and they're not coming down to where they were before they got inflated. That's the issue.
We never have deflation.
Right.
We always have inflation. It always goes up, and once it goes up, it stays and it gets there. It's like when you were giving your kids allowance when they were growing up. If you raised that allowance, you were stuck. You were always going to give that allowance. It never went backwards, and that's the way inflation works.
And we have shrinkflation too, right?
Yes, we really do, because you get less for what is there. And
right. You open up that cereal box and there's all air and just a little bag of cereal, right?
Well, I see it more in the Big Macs because they're getting smaller and smaller, but you can tell by looking at me that I'm more familiar with Big Macs than I am good, healthy cereal that you might have. But the biggest question is, how are you going to deal with it? Mm-hmm. And what most people are faced with if they're working with a normal advisor is they're working with the Monte Carlo model. Now, when I used to work in church work, I remember in Indianapolis one time, we found this guy that came in for our children's church, and we had a big Sunday, where he invited all kind of friends and everything, and we had the gospel horse. and the gospel horse came in, and the guy would say, this gospel horse can do math. Watch, what is 6 minus 3? And that big white gospel horse would go, and he'd go 1, 2, 3, and the kids would go crazy. And then the gospel horse would be asked, what is 2 plus 1? And the horse would go 1, 2, 3. As long as you ask him the answer was 3, he was always accurate.
Right.
You understand?
Yeah.
And it seems like all the big box firms have one answer, and that is the Monte Carlo model. Now, if I boil that Monte Carlo model that most people use down is, they say, you know, inflation, let's count on it being 3%. You know the good news about that? Like you said earlier, for 40 years, we got used to it being around 3%. So it worked. It's like everything in this industry. It works until it doesn't work anymore.
Yep.
So for 3% worked for a while. And then they say, well, let's count on a 6% average gain. That's in the Monte Carlo model. But it's never average. It's never flat. It's always up, down, all over the place. And then originally the Monte Carlo model says you can take out 4%. And now they've altered it and say, really be careful. You should only really try to take out 3.2%. So 3% inflation, 6% gain, 3.2% withdrawal. Well, let's rewind to 2022. Stocks were down 20%, bonds were down 20%, inflation was up 9.1%. Wow.
That doesn't work so much anymore,
I just blew up the model.
Yep.
I just blew up the model. There's got to be an alternative to that model. And you've got to be really careful when you do that. And you say, well, what do you guys do that are so different? Well, you need to build into a real financial plan, and you need to have that built so that there's just different streams of income that turn on at different times. For instance, for those of you who are single, you have one Social Security. When do you turn on that stream of income? If you're still working and you're past your full retirement age, it's possible for you to turn it on. If you turn on the Social Security before your full retirement age, you may go over $23,000, close to $23,000 a year in income, and start paying back for every $2 over, you pay back $1 of Social Security. So it doesn't do you any good to turn on that stream of income before full retirement age. But after full retirement age, you turn it on. Even if you're still working, you've got your income and you've got your Social Security. Now let's bring in a married partner. If you're married, you have maybe 2 streams of income if you're both working and 2 streams of Social Security. Well, a lot of people stagger that, and they don't just both quit at the same time and both turn on Social Security at the same time. We encourage a lot of people to take the larger Social Security in a married couple's situation and let that larger Social Security, it's called the breadwinner Social Security, continue to grow. Turn on the lower Social Security, and if you can get by with that, fine. Do it as long as you can. If you get to 70, great, because you've let that breadwinner grow as long as it can, because at 70, you need to turn on your Social Security one way or the other. It's not going to get any better. It's not going to keep growing. They're not going to pay you back for it, for not turning it on. So maybe let that breadwinner grow. Why? Because when one of you passes away in a marriage, the breadwinner stays regardless of who passes away, and the lower Social Security goes away. Now, what if you have a pension? When do you turn on that pension? Big question. All right? Because that's another stream of income.
And how you turn it on,
and
too.
And how you turn it on.
Yep.
And do you turn it on just your life? Or do you turn it on your life and lasting as long as the spouse is alive?
Yep.
75% as much goes to the spouse that survives. All kinds of options that need to be built. This is what we talk about when we say financial planning.
Yes.
Okay? And does that pension have a COLA, a cost of living adjustment, where it goes up? If it's a public pension, it's probably 2%. Some of the others don't have one. So whatever you're getting at 45, man, it's not a help for inflation. Because whatever you're getting, if you're 45, whatever you're getting at 65, if you're getting $4,500, when you're 85, it's still going to be $4,500, and it's not going to be impacted for inflation. So I'm not trying to feed your head with all kind of numbers and all kind of things here. I'm just saying that just a rote 3% inflation, 6% growth, 3.2 coming out. It's not real. It
doesn't work in
life.
today's environment, you know.
It doesn't.
And I think, you know, the other thing to point out, just to really help folks understand the gravity of the situation is that when inflation was that historical 3% per year, what that meant for you is that your cost of living would double every 24 years. So that means if you needed $100,000 to live off of this year, 24 years from now, you would need $200,000 just to buy the same amount of goods and services that you're buying today. But what has happened since inflation has gone up? In the last several years, we've seen that window of time shorten, which means if inflation, continues to be higher than it has been, your cost of living could easily double 2 or 3 times just in your retirement when you are living on a fixed income. This is why it's so critical that you have to plan for that and you have to factor inflation into your income plan.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And the whole thing in what I've said and exactly what you've said is you can't just have a rote plan. You can't just say it's automatic pilot. You can't set it and forget it. You've got to constantly work with that plan to make sure it's on track. If I'm flying from Southern California to Dallas, the pilot has a flight plan. But when we get out over the Salton Sea or we get over the Colorado River, you'll feel that plane it'll make a little bit of an adjustment. And sometimes if there's a storm that pops up between here and Dallas, I've had it go all the way around, and we've gone all the way up into Oklahoma and come back almost from the east to come into Dallas. That's when a major inflation hits. But you've got to have somebody steering the ship during those times, guiding that plane during those times to avoid the storms, to negotiate the storms, because it's not always clear sailing. It's not always 3%, 6%, 3.2%, set it and forget it. You've got to have somebody helping you. Big reason what we do at our place is we don't really want to work with people who just want an investment person. Like I say, a lot of these companies are called investment companies. We want to help you manage your wealth all the way through. When I did start my position in 1995, within a month, I had a client who is still a client of mine 29 years ago. He's an attorney out in San Bernardino, and he's been a faithful client for all 29 years I've been in existence, 1 month after I started. And that's the kind of clients we want, the ones that are going to live and grow with us.
Yes, absolutely right. And so if you're out there and you're going, you know what, up to this point, I've only had someone who's dealt with my investments. If you know that you need a comprehensive, holistic financial plan that's going to address your income, inflation like we're talking about today, investments, your taxes, healthcare planning, and legacy planning, you want to get your complimentary retirement blueprint. Experience that difference for yourself. And so to claim yours, all you have to do is call that number on the bottom of your screen, 866-709-1462. Or again, you're also welcome to scan that QR code and that will get you connected as well. We'll be back with more right after this.
Better is just better, but it doesn't begin without a plan. Better, it's the American way, from a better house to a better career to a better life for our kids. Americans strive for better. But when it comes to your retirement, what does better mean to you? A better income? A better lifestyle? A better solution? A better retirement begins with a financial plan. To get your complimentary financial plan, call the number you see here. It's your retirement and an opportunity for better.
Welcome back to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. I'm Kristen Oakley, and today Tom and I are discussing inflation. And do you have a plan built in as part of your income plan to account for inflation? And Tom, I know you meet with a lot of folks across Southern California. Some folks come in, they have no plan in place. Some folks have some semblance of an income plan. What do you typically see? I know folks tend to fall into different categories, and are there existing plans even factoring in inflation?
Generally, no. They're factoring in, the possibility of a 3% inflation.
Right, the Monte Carlo model we talked about.
But when it's outside the box, they don't know how to deal with it. You know, I grew up on a farm, and there's an old saying on the farm that it's like a calf looking at a new gate. They don't know how to negotiate it. You know, they don't know how to go through the hole because it's out of the box.
Right. When 2022 happens, for example, and the bottle blows up, they don't have a recourse.
What happens? I mean, and even the old stocks and bonds mix in 2022, stocks were down 20% and bonds were down 20% as well.
Right.
So the idea of an income, and some people say, well, what's an average income in retirement? There's no average income. There's your income and there's somebody else's income and somebody else's income. I've seen people in the 29 years, the lowest I've ever seen is a couple that needed $730 a month, and they were happy as they could be. And I've seen people who literally needed $38,000 a month because of the commitments that they had, the money they had made, and those kind of things. And they legitimately needed $38,000 a month. So, so more than that, like you mentioned, like categories, maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
There's some people who come in and you're underfunded. You know, there's not a snowball's chance, you know, that you're really going to have enough money. And I'm sorry to say that, but that's reality. I mean, read the news, read the reports on retirement, and you're underfunded. And my advice to you is work as long as you can, save as much as you can, try to get a job with a 401k where they match. I don't care how old you are, start. Get started saving something, watch your budget, cut your expenses as much as you can. You're always going to be underfunded. There are some that are going to be overfunded. I mean, you can blow money. I mean, I jokingly say you can light your fireplace with $100 bills, especially as few a times as we light fireplaces in Southern California, okay? And so you've got more money, but you still need to make the right decision on your Social Security. You still need to make the right decision on how you pay tax, especially taxes if you're overfunded, because you usually have most of that overfunded money in tax situations where you need to get on there and say that ease my tax bill. You need to hit that button and find out what your tax bill is really going to be and see what somebody could help you who's proactive in helping you with your taxes. There it is on the screen. Hit it, 𝗬𝗎𝑚ytaxbill.com. You can enter your money and find out what your tax bill. If you're overfunded, you've got plenty of money. You say, what's left? Those people who are in the middle. Those people who are, it's touch and go. The people who come in, Kristin, and the first question they say is, and I ask them, why are you here? What can I best help you with? We want to know if we can afford to retire. And there are times when, yes, they can't light their fireplace with $100 bills, like the overfunded. No, they don't have to keep working necessarily like the underfunded. Okay, but they're in the middle. They're constrained. You've got to be careful with what you do. You need a plan. You need a plan with levers and adjustments that's going to increase the flow of money when you need more money because of inflation, when you need more money because of emergencies. All of those need to be built in that plan. And those are the people who, more than anybody else, now the overfunded, we can save you more money than a lot of the underfunded people have. But those of you who are constrained and you don't know whether you can retire or not, that's what a retirement blueprint will do for you, is it will give you laid out how you can see we can retire and we can make it. Got to be careful here, got to do these kind of things, but we can do it.
And I know you always say that the sigh of relief that comes when folks have that is your why. And we want you to be able to experience that as well. So again, to claim your complimentary retirement blueprint, 866-709-1462. We love you, Southern California. Be safe, be happy, be blessed. We look forward to being back with you next time here on Right on the Money with Tom Mosley.